Welcome back to the FAQ Shack. This is the show where we dive deep into your biggest questions about, well, pretty much everything. Let's get right to it. All right, today's question comes from Alex in Ohio, and honestly, it's a fantastic one. Alex writes, I keep seeing headlines about Latin America swinging from left to right and back again, like the pink tide and now a turn to the right. Is there a historical pattern to all this instability? Alex, you've absolutely put your finger on something huge. It's a question that gets right to the core of what's happening in the region today.
So, to answer you directly, Alex, yes, you are not imagining it. There is absolutely a pattern. It's like this giant historical pendulum that's been swinging back and forth for more than 2 centuries. And if we want to understand why those headlines you're seeing keep popping up, we have to rewind way back.
So our story really kicks off with the fight for independence. But, this wasn't just about telling Europe goodbye. It was about trying to build completely new nations pretty much from the ground up. And that process, well, it planted the seeds for a lot of the conflict and instability that would follow.
Just look at this period. The late 1700s and early 1800s were, a complete revolutionary whirlwind across the Americas. It starts with the U.S. in 1776, then you have the absolutely historic Haitian Revolution, and then it just sweeps across Spanish and Portuguese America. All these new nations were literally being born from the ashes of old empires.
But, and this is so important, not all of these revolutions were the same, not even close. You look at the United States, right? It was mostly landowners and merchants who wanted political control but wanted to keep the social structure the same. Then you look at what leaders like Simón Bolívar were dealing with in South America. It was a totally different world. He famously described his people as this mixed species of Aborigines and Spaniards caught between worlds. He saw the U.S. system and thought, no way, that's just too weak, too complicated for the kind of unique problems we're facing here.
And these challenges, they led to some unbelievably brutal conflicts. Just look at this number, 69%. During the Paraguayan War in the 1800s, it's estimated that Paraguay lost nearly 70% of its entire population. Think about that. That level of devastation, it leaves scars, deep, deep scars that affect a nation's stability for generations.
Okay, so after all that struggle for political freedom, the next huge question was money. How do you actually build a prosperous, stable economy? And that question kicked off some massive, really ambitious experiments across the whole region in the 20th century. And this table just lays it all out, clear as day. This is the economic pendulum in action. Look at the period from 1950 to 1980. The big idea was state-led industrialization. Basically, the government is in the driver's seat, and they got an average GDP growth of 5.5%. That's pretty impressive. But then, the pendulum swings. By the 1990s, it's all about market-based reforms, and look what happens to the growth rate. It drops to 3.4%. That kind of shift creates massive economic whiplash. So let's just break down that first model for a second. State-led industrialization. The idea was basically, hey, let's make our own stuff instead of buying it from everyone else. The government would step in, protect its new industries from foreign competition, and really try to build up the economy from the inside out. It's a vision of self-sufficiency, and man, it was a powerful force for decades.
All right, so if that economic pendulum wasn't complicated enough, now we're going to throw another massive log on the fire, the Cold War. This whole economic debate didn't happen in a bubble. It got completely supercharged by this global fight between superpowers, which basically turned Latin America into an ideological battleground.
It was a classic showdown. On one side, you have the United States, laser-focused on one thing, stopping the spread of communism. And that meant using agencies like the CIA to make sure friendly governments were in power. And on the other side, the Soviet Union, doing the exact opposite, backing leftist movements and revolutions, with Cuba being the most famous example. The whole region was just caught right in the middle of this epic tug-of-war.
And the consequences of this, they were absolutely devastating. We're not just talking about politics here. In the name of fighting communism, the U.S. propped up some of the most brutal military dictatorships you can imagine. We're talking widespread human rights abuses, systematic torture, and literally millions of people disappearing in places like Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay. The trauma from that era, the mistrust, it's still incredibly raw today.
Okay, so we've been through a lot of history. The big question is, how does all that turbulence, all the political, economic, and ideological fighting actually shape the Latin America we see in the headlines right now? Well, the echoes of the past are absolutely everywhere.
Just listen to this quote from Geraldo Muñoz, Chile's former foreign minister. He says, Chile will never be in favor of military or other intervention in Venezuela. The use of force is not a solution. Now, that's not just some dry policy statement. That is a direct result of Chile's own horrifying experience with a violent dictatorship. That collective memory, that trauma, it directly shapes how they see the world and interact with their neighbors today.
And it's not just foreign policy, it's domestic politics too. Remember that turn to the right Alex asked about? Well, a huge driver for that is what you see right here on this chart. The top concerns for voters are things like crime, violence, and security. And when people are worried about those things, they often turn to right-leaning parties who are seen as being tougher on law and order. It's a message that really hits home when you feel unsafe.
And just to make it even more interesting, today there are totally new forces pulling on that pendulum. You've got the global race for green energy resources, like lithium, which is sparking huge debates about who should control it, the state or foreign companies. You have powerful indigenous rights movements that are fundamentally challenging old ideas about borders and nations. And of course, there's the massive influence of China, which is now a huge investor and creditor in the region, offering a real alternative to the US for the first time in a long time.
Okay, so let's circle all the way back to where we started, back to Alex's question. We've gone through centuries of history, so is there a pattern? Let's put the pieces together.
The answer is a resounding yes. And we can actually break it down into a pretty clear 4-step cycle. Step 1, a really difficult and messy independence process that baked instability and inequality right into the foundation of these new nations. Step 2, decades of swinging back and forth between big economic experiments, which creates a ton of volatility. Step 3, the Cold War comes along and pours fuel on the fire, leaving behind this deep legacy of trauma and mistrust. And that brings us to Step 4, today, where voter frustration over all of that history is what keeps that pendulum swinging from left to right.
And that really leaves us with a big, multi-billion-dollar question for the future. With all these new pressures we just talked about, the global demand for resources, the rise of new world powers like China, these powerful social movements, are we just watching a new version of the same old cycle begin? Or could this time be different? Could these new forces finally be what it takes to break the pattern and stop that pendulum once and for all?
So there you have it, our deep dive into Latin America's political pendulum. Alex from Ohio, thank you so much for sending in such a brilliant question. And for everyone listening, what questions do you have? What should we tackle next? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in to the FAQ Shack.